Good evening and welcome to this, the second in a series called The Rural Condition, being produced for the Architecture Foundation as part of their 100-day studio. I'm Niall Maxwell, and this week I am very excited to be welcoming Jaume Mayol and Ryan Kennihan to join me in a conversation about, well, we don't know what yet. So I'm going to share my screen just to do a little bit of an introduction to set the scene for today. Please bear with me. So last week we had the great pleasure of having Marion Foster and Jonathan Hendry join us to talk about the pitfalls, the pleasures, the pragmatism of working in rural conditions. And it was actually quite a revealing conversation. And I think for many of the people that messaged in and took part, quite enlightening as to how people practice in different locations and at different scales. Mary quite openly admitting that she enjoys stalking other architects as a means of finding forms of collaboration, but also as a form of peer review. But she also talked quite honestly about immersing herself in the process of practice, where there was a very difficult blurring between her private and business life, brought on really by her passion for the outdoors and the way in which she could spend 3 or 4 days on a site camping to really understand where and how she was going to approach the design project. And then converse to that was really Jonathan working in a different part of the countryside in the marshlands of the east of England, and really a sort of a passionate, obsessive, ploughing his own furrow, as he's been recorded as saying, just really almost ignoring the London scene and producing a fine portfolio of work. So I think over the next few weeks, we're hopeful that we will be talking to a number of different individuals, both in the UK, Ireland, and across Europe, about their different methods of practice within the rural condition, both for practitioners who are based rurally and those who are predominantly delivering buildings in rural settings. So this will vary from country to country, but also from experience, people who are delivering, for example, high energy buildings, to those who are delivering a very tried and tested portfolio over a number of years. But also looking at younger practices, both in Germany and Norway, who are really just starting out, but have a great sort of portfolio of ideas balanced against teaching. And it also gives us the opportunity to look back, and I think many of the practices that are going to be in conversation are always going to be referencing people like Oldington, or Olgiati, or Tavera, or of course Alberto Ponis. Not forgetting Pizzigoni or Caesar, or tonight, which is quite interesting, our friend Utzon in Majorca. So the conversation hopefully starts really with Ryan, as the theme, sort of twofold theme tonight. One is something about detail, the other is about the interloper. Ryan is obviously from Chicago. He moved to Dublin in the early 2000s, right at the boom of the tiger economy, when of course there were sort of passports to allow a lot of people in for work. And what's interesting about Ryan was he was almost bucking the trend of how young architects were leaving Ireland to go and learn their trade elsewhere in Europe and the UK. And over the years, what's come with maybe being, having distance from the place, as he described, the outsider's perspective is always useful. He's actually bringing to Ireland a really unusual take on his own architecture, which I picked up on a few years ago. And when I approached Ryan to take part in this, I love the fact that he actually said that he had a low profile, whereas in fact, I think he has an enormous profile that should be much bigger than it probably is beyond the architectural scene. So through a number of very personal projects, he doesn't produce a lot because he balances his time between that and teaching. He's crafting out what is a really fine portfolio of work, mainly domestic, with the odd sort of a civic project thrown in, all sort of touching a certain type of language, which is commonplace and ordinary, whilst at the same time elevating itself to almost a form of high architecture. But it's also about giving back to the context and setting in which it's based, as well as feeling right for its context and right in terms of scale. But there is something, when I see this image, for example, that almost makes me think of the metabolists, the idea of paring something down to become really quite refined, even though it's composed of very simple elements. And a project he's just been finishing, which he obviously said to me, was there's a piece of gaffer tape on the downpipe. So sorry about that, Ryan. You can tell us why the gaffer tape's there in a minute. And of course then to another island in the Mediterranean, to Jaume Mayol and his wife Irene, who are obviously been working in the island as we worked out just before we came on air for nearly 20 years, which is testament to how old we all are. But also testament to the fact that they took the jump from education and went straight into practice, which is probably one of the hardest things to do, rather than cutting their teeth with different practices before establishing a position and understanding how they were going to run their own architectural practice. Working mainly on the island, often for family or for friends or friends of friends, producing a really beautiful body of work, but also working within the traditions and the trades and abilities of what the island can offer. And I remember the talk that Jaume gave for the Architecture Foundation in the autumn of 2018. And I don't think I've seen as many tile setting out drawings in one lecture, but it was a testament to this obsession and this detail, but also understanding how to work with what you've got, working with the ordinary, and working with the materials that the island could provide him with. So last summer I had the good opportunity to go to Camp Picafor and meet up with them all, and to stay in one of these amazing apartments. And you understand this better when you start to see how he draws and how they actually work up the detail of these projects to produce really quite unusual architecture in fantastic settings. So the most important thing probably about this conversation is that Jaume and Irene are also interlopers like Ryan, because they've now started to move away from the island and are producing buildings in Europe. And this, of course, was the school in Switzerland that they won in competition, where the judging committee called it the most Swiss entry, which was obviously produced by a couple from Majorca. And it is a building really in amazing analysis of context and location, but also that beautiful subversion of the vernacular and understanding how to work with the palette of materials. A really fine piece of work. So tonight's talk is called Great Thought in Small Things, which is actually a quote from Andrew Clancy's article in the Architecture Review about the Irish architecture. And I thought actually, as a starting point, this is a perfect introduction to Jaume and Ryan. Welcome, thanks very much for joining me.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for the introduction and the invitation now.
That's all right, that's all right. And where do we find you tonight, Jaume? Are you at home?
Well, yes, I'm at home because of this crisis we are having, no? And I am in a very small village in the middle of Mallorca. It's called Montuiris, where I was born. Well, in fact, I'm in the house where I was born. No? I have my parents on top, no? Then it's a village of 2,000 people, and here we are in the rural.
But a lot of your work is in the village as well, isn't it?
Yeah, because as you said, when we start working, we start very early, and we were working for our friends, no? And our friends were from here. And that's why our houses or our projects are mainly here.
But that's still a kind of constant of work, though, isn't it? It's whilst you start to do other types of work, you're also still producing houses for your friends and for their friends. Yeah,
we are lucky. They still believe in our work, in our architecture somehow, no? Then we are lucky, I mean, because sometimes it's really tough, as you all know, when you build something for a friend or for part of your family. You can lose that friend or that part of the family, you know, because you have a lot of discussions, no, a lot of, let's say problems, no, or discussions during the construction, no? And they are spending a lot of money for building that house, no? And it can become really tough, no? When I was building the house for my brother and my sister-in-law, no, they were like every Monday we were talking about the house during the construction, and it was really tough every Monday during the lunch, no, to talk about the house, no? And well, because they imagine things and they have problems and they have to pay and they have a lot of things on their minds, no? And yeah, but yeah, you are trying to help them at the end, no?
Ryan, where do we find you tonight? You decamped to the office, is that right?
I briefly decamped, yes. I'm lucky, I guess, in a way that my office is 500 meters from my house in Dublin. So, but I have been, we have the pandemic here as well. So I've been in my house as well until just today. So this is my brief evening out.
Okay. Now, what I asked you both to do is actually start with a couple of images. So I just need to share the screen again. Am I sharing? I am sharing, yes? Is that a yes? Can everyone see the screen? Okay. Jaume, do you want to start by explaining the two images that you've chosen and why?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, you asked us to select some pictures that could represent our way of doing things, but I can say that it's the way that we try to do things. It's never easy, no? But these are two images that we love the thoughts behind, no? Because it's really simple, but it's simple when you see it, not before. Before, when you have the problem, it's completely difficult, no? In this case, as you see, well, some of you may know the island, you know, these are the Tramontana Mountains. It's our mountains we have in the island. They are not very high, it's around 1,000 meters high. And it's this landscape, it's man-made, but somehow doesn't seem. It seems natural. This is one of the main conditions that made us to choose this picture. And as you can imagine, the previous image, the previous landscape before this one was a very rocky landscape, full of rocks, full of stones, full of obstacles, let's say, you know. And the people living there were not able to plant any tree in that mountains, no. Then what they did is it's obvious, now it's obvious, no? But before it wasn't, I think, no? They decided to took this resource, the resource that it's at the same time problem and resource, problem and solution, obstacle and resource, no? Those stones, no? And they were just organizing the stones in a certain way that allowed them to plant trees there, no? The organization of those stones, now it's very clear, it was to build like these dry stone walls to build terraces, no? Then the earth came, or they put earth, no, to build these terraces, no? But even the very last detail, when you approach, when you zoom in and zoom in and zoom in inside of these walls, you see how the geometry of these walls is, no? It's not vertical. It's a bit not vertical, let's say. And they didn't use any mortar in between the stones. It's just dry stone that works with gravity that allows the water to go out. Then the drainage of this terrain will exist, because if not, the tree will root and it will not produce fruits and whatever. But then from the resource until the detail, it's a whole. It's just one idea. It's just one idea that starts from a very rough, very simple problem. No, it's to plant trees, to have, in this case, olive, to have oil finally, and this landscape became with the years, last 10 years, a part of the World Heritage. Then somehow this idea that is behind of this image, I think, is the way we try to work, but it's always super difficult to bring these concepts. But finally, another thing that we could say, apart from, let's say, logical, natural, etc., it's beautiful. It's beautiful. We can talk about beauty also if you want.
So, what about the second image that that you selected?
Well, the second image, it's okay. This one. It's again somehow the same idea. This is a village in the island called Sepobla. In fact, a friend, I didn't took the photo. I passed by that street a lot of times, but the photo was taken by a friend of mine, Rafael. Is an architect from there, from Sepobla. And it's in a street where all the houses have two streets, one on the opposite, and in this street they have the garages. Then originally they had the left-hand doors. It's like centuries ago. It was a big opening because they have to put the car inside of their house, inside of the garage, the cart and the horses or whatever. Then they built this huge opening, and the only way of covering this horizontal lintel was to build an arch with stones. Then they had the stones, they built this arch with the only material they had to cover this long dimension, let's say 2.5 meters, more or less. But with the years, the cart disappeared and appeared the car. The car is longer than the cart, and they were not able to use the normal doors. I don't know the name in English. The normal doors. They need to introduce the sliding door because they couldn't take out the car, let's say, or open the doors. And at that moment, right now, let's say this century, we have the reinforcing concrete, then they can use the horizontal lintel, but they didn't throw away this old door. They just took it and reused it, but directly. I mean, this is not recycling, it's reusing. Recycling has some industrial inputs, let's say, of transformation, and coming back and forth and transport and whatever. This is kilometer zero, let's say. It's just bringing the same door and at the same place. And finally, it has somehow this way of reusing the door. It has some constructive elements that you need, and you can use them in a way or another to build something again beautiful, like this circle that you have, the joint between the different woods, the old ones and the new ones, etc. Then again, the obstacle is not a problem, but it's an advantage to build the solution. Somehow this is a way of thinking, let's say, and it's very, I would say that it's very pragmatic, very direct. I have, when you explain these stories, there is no doubt. It's logical, it's nice, it's beautiful, and it works.
But it's also just the power of observation, isn't it? The idea that you're recording these things, you're documenting, and you're building up this sort of library of references within the way you think about practice.
Well, we have thousands of photographies, of course, of references, of things we found around, and sometimes we don't have neither the phone, neither anything, but we do some sketches, of course, like everyone, I imagine, we have seen that, but it's something that starts from our stomach. It's not something that, it's not a strategy that we decide to have this strategy. Something that starts from our stomach, our, I don't know, unconsciously, to to keep or to take these photos and to keep them. All of those photos are coming from this pragmatism, from this very old stuff, or this traditional way of doing things, no? And this is not a strategy. I mean, it's just something that started like suddenly. We were interested on this way of doing, and we keep on. We are still surprised by these kind of solutions. So, and we found things every day, let's say, or every week. No,
it's intuitive as well. Ryan, could I bring you in here to maybe talk about your two images, because you showed this, I think, in a talk you gave at the Porto School, I think a year or so ago, and I was taken by this when I watched it online. I'll let you talk about it rather than talk over you.
Sure. It's actually an image of Irish artist Sean Scully's, but it's of a stone wall, in particular a stone gate on the Aran Islands in the far west of Ireland. And I think it's interesting that Jaume and I both chose a kind of a dry stone wall independently of each other. That the reason it's constructed is for the purpose of agriculture. You know, in the west of Ireland, the building material for these walls and for the houses and churches and everything comes really as a direct result of needing to make soil, to retain soil, so you can grow something. So on the Aran Islands, where this wall is, the walls are made and then backfilled with sand and seaweed, and really the soil is created on sheer rock surfaces to allow agriculture to happen. So anyway, this is just a particular moment where you can see the more stable wall on either side of it is bonded, but a gate for allowing livestock to move between fields is made again, and the only thing that's available there, because there aren't any trees or anything like that, resources are quite scarce, and so it's made with maybe a more easily moved, smaller, rounded rocks to make a gate. You might show the other one, and I'll kind
of sure, it's here.
And so then this is an image of a ride. It's a circular building in plan, and it's in the curtilage of one of Ireland's most famous Palladian Georgian mansions, Rusborough House. And it's a 19th century thing in the field behind the house. And essentially it's so that you can go, you know, if you're the kind of person living in Rusborough House and you want to ride your horse in the often inclement weather, you can go out and ride in circles in this building undercover. And to me, the amazing thing about this is the building itself is a response to the climate. But a lot of the other things are imported, one imagines, you know, the kind of arch form, the ironwork that goes along with it, maybe some of the Palladianism that came along with the house behind it. You know, it's high architecture in every way, except then really beautifully adapted to, maybe the more restricted palette of Ireland and the more demanding environment of Ireland. So the thing that's really amazing about it is the gutter, which runs along that inner circular face, is drained into every one of those vertical cast iron pipes. And so they're each both a column and a drain. And then the water goes into the granite base, which is octagonal. And obviously that's there to prevent them from maybe rusting and sitting in the water all the time. And after the water goes into the granite base, it comes back out, and you can just see those little dishes in front of each column. And so the water comes back out again and is there, presumably for the horses to drink from before going to an underground cistern. And so I guess I show both of these images because, I mean, we're interested obviously in making an architecture that's communicative, I guess, or meaningful, but primarily to the people who live around the place where the building is. It's nice if all of the architects in London like it or in Majorca, but I'm mainly interested in communicating with the local people around it. And so we're always studying I guess what I call local building culture. And that's high architecture and it's low architecture, and it's looking at material solutions which deal with materials which are available and local knowledge, and really it kind of the kind of study of that building culture is constant, and it really spreads from high to low, from vernacular to, you know, contemporary industrial park trash, like everything that is contextually read, I suppose, something we're interested in. So that's, yeah, I think
interesting. Because I suppose the thing for me that's interesting about your position, Ryan, is that it's written about you that, you know, Sullivan, Wright, and Misa, you know, are never far away from your kind of thinking. But for me, the most interesting thing about your position is that you're sort of there with fresh eyes in Ireland, looking at things maybe in a different way than if you'd grown up there. You must have conversations about that with fellow practitioners and clients and people alike. Can you maybe expand on
that? Yeah, I mean, certainly. Well, I guess it's easiest explained that my mother, now having lived in Ireland, my mother believes I sound like an Irish person and have an Irish accent. And everyone in Ireland still refers to me as the Yank, being a Yankee from the States. So I kind of don't fit in either location. I would suppose maybe when I first started out, I was certainly attracted, I guess, to all of the way things are made here. You know, everything is stone, and the lack of trees, and the kind of weight of history, and the culture of the building objects which you find everywhere, and especially in the rural environments and centers of towns and things. And so I saw value in it right away, maybe, and was chasing after it right away, and allowing it to influence my work right away. And maybe, I mean, my colleagues here will say I said this wrong, but, you know, maybe here they had a feeling back then, or in the 90s or whatever, of being slightly underdogs or forgotten or something at the edge of Europe, maybe, and didn't see value in it as much. And so when I got here, really the tendency within the architecture scene was maybe one more towards internationalism or Spanish modernisms or things like this, as opposed to trying to resonate somehow with the existing building culture here. And really over that past, whatever it is, 19 years or something, I feel like that's kind of shifted somehow. And I've gone along with that. Do
you think there's a privilege of the outsider's eye in that? Because I could say I would empathize with that a little bit from not growing up in Wales, but trying to understand your context when everything is unfamiliar.
Yeah, I mean, I guess on one hand, you're not burdened perhaps by the, having all the kind of background histories of things. You know, you can just pursue your own interest unburdened, I guess, you know? And you know, for example, when I first came here, I remember walking right up to Jaume Mayol and just having the chat at an opening, you know, when I was 20 or whatever, 23, which if you were someone from here and Jaume Mayol was at the opening, you would be like, you know, like, you know, Jaume Mayol. And so I guess there's a certain freedom or something when you're unburdened by things. But also really the outsider's perspective maybe makes you understand quite glaring your ignorance really about how things work here. And so you recognize in the deficit that I have to make up for that by learning so much more, right? I have to ask everybody how something works, or, you know, how it should be done, or how is it done in this place, you know, so that you don't have that kind of appearance of the ignorant outsider, you know. And so if you recognize that and use that, to help you learn, I suppose, is where it's primarily a benefit.
That's interesting. Jaume, you have almost the opposite problem, that you're sort of born and bred in where the main work of the practice is. And that comes with its own complications in terms of relationships from childhood, which are now maybe professional, or you know, adjacencies have always been so close to the work and the clients and the builders. How does it work? Because obviously I've come to visit you, and I could see the community that you live in is very tight, but at the same time it's small.
Yeah, but I completely agree with Ryan when he's saying that when you are when you are from foreigner, when you are not from that place, you pay kind of more attention, or I would say another attention to the things, no? In somehow we Irene and I, we studied architecture in Barcelona, well, in Sant Cugat, no, in the mainland, because there is no school of architecture here in the island, no? And when we came back with somehow a first point of view over this world of architecture, no? We start to look at things in another way, let's say, no? I have never paid attention to how a wall was built, or how I don't know, the sandstone is used, or whatever, no? And that also happens to us when we went to Switzerland, of course, no? You get like surprised for those incredible traditional buildings, no? We were like walking, I can remember, like going for secondary roads, no? Like with our car, no? And stopping in front of these crazy buildings, no? In front of these big black wooden barns, no? And like stopping the car and getting in, like no one was there, but it was I don't know, incredible structures and incredible things that you don't see in the island, no? And we were like, wow, amazed with that, no? Then when we did the project of the school, it was super clear what we need to do, no? To build that kind of landscape, no? But somehow, I think it's the same thing that happened to Jaume Mayol, no? When he came to Mallorca. It has been said for a long time that Mayol from Denmark, no? He has built the most Majorcan house in the island, no? That's crazy, no? It's one guy coming from abroad, no? Well, from Miami, or from Sydney, passing by Miami and coming here and building the most Majorcan house, no? I think when he came, he used to say, okay, what a nice stone you have, no? But people from here used to say, okay, well, that's the typical stone, and we have it. And you don't pay attention to this, like, common things, no? To the infraordinary that we were talking last time, no? It's like the common things, the things that happen every day, no? And I think these are the most amazing things, no? This sandstone, the mares Mayol used, it's all along the island, no? And at the end, these are our resources, no? And to use these resources in some way, I think it's the way we feel comfortable to work.
That's interesting you say that, because I think we touched on it in the conversation we had last week about Rudowski and the whole role of the architect. And maybe there is something liberating when you're working out of context. I think for you, Ryan, you were sort of maybe articulating that earlier, in the sense of you're coming fresh and you're looking at things from a totally different perspective. Therefore, you're not laden with the baggage of things. And also you're seeing the value in things. Whereas I suppose what you're saying, Jaume, is coming back from college, coming back from all your study, then you almost look at your past with new eyes, maybe seeing a different type of value that wasn't there before. Would that be fair?
I think, well, I would say that there are 2 points, no? It's that the knowledge you have from the school, it's something very different than the knowledge you have after working, no? After working for a couple of years or 20, as you said. But however, like the people who love the place where they live, they love the same things that you do after years. Who will not love Jaume Mayol house? I mean, it's everyone. It's not a question of being an architect or not, of having the eyes of an architect or not. It's to look at the ways as a farmer, as a guy who works the fields, you know, in a very low way, you know, like very direct. You know? It's not to be too complicated or too too complex. You know?
You talk about tradition as being or maybe going even back to the sort of the early etymology of the word, to sort of actually have a value that maybe tradition is seen as something negative in architectural conversations, whereas in fact actually you're seeing the value in it, the idea of pushing it along, and also sort of giving the next generation the value of it.
I think, okay, I feel completely in the thoughts of the tradition, in the thoughts, I mean, no, in the way they are looking to a stone or a tree or vegetables to cook. I don't know who will bring, I don't know, apples from the other part of the world to eat. They cannot be tasty, you know. Somehow it's to look at the things you have and to do what you can with the things you have around you, with the resources you have, no? And resources are not only materials in this case, no? Because we have a lot of kinds of resources, no? We have the wind blowing, and we have typologies, and we have a lot of things, no? And these ingredients can build up a way of not only building but being in the world somehow, no?
Well, I forgot to mention at the beginning, by the way, if anybody wants to message Jaume or Ryan, please do through the chat room. And if you just direct it at me, Niall Maxwell, then I can obviously just field that while we're talking. Ryan, can I maybe move the conversation on to this, this conversation about teaching and learning? Because you're both sort of tied to some form of academic pursuit. Can you maybe just describe for everybody your kind of role and how you split profession from, or practice from teaching?
Yeah, there's not much split, I guess, in a way. It's all interwoven and yeah, bleeding between each other. I mean, I teach at the Dublin School of Architecture. I ran the thesis program there for a while, and actually this year I started teaching first year, which is great. And I suppose time-wise, you asked me about the time before. My time is, I teach a studio, I teach 2 lecture courses, and so it's kind of 2.5 days of the week in school and 2.5 days in the office. Of course, then I go home at 6 and do kids and things, and then I'm back in the office or working from 9 until midnight. So that's kind of the weighting is maybe more towards the office. But in terms of what we talk about or what we teach, certainly the themes that I'm interested in within the office are the themes that are posed to the students or taught to the students. And I guess it's not really in a cynical way, like where students are doing research for us or something like that. It's more that I think the issues that we deal with are somehow universally important for students to learn, you know, ideas about structure or contextual readings or contextual architecture or, yeah, I mean, I guess so that the themes we pose within the studios are always themes which are relevant to the practice as well. And I think actually that fluidity between the practice and the academy, I think it's really important, especially in a place like Ireland, maybe where there's a tight community, there's not a huge number of schools, that fluidity maybe between issues of practice and issues of studios helps to build a sort of school of thought within an area, right? That it's not just, oh, academia is over here and practice is over here and it's taking care of business. But actually that fluidity means that I guess you start to see a kind of, yeah, school of thinking maybe. I wouldn't call it like a Dublin school, for instance, but you do seem, for instance, themes or overlaps between what practices practicing in the city or all over the country are interested in. And I think that builds character in places, right? It builds better architecture actually, because there's this very open, fluid conversation from school to practice and practice to practice. And yeah, I think that's a really good thing, I guess.
And it seems evident, doesn't it, from the output now of Ireland, especially within your generation, that it's very strong and it seems very rooted. Are you, is there a sense that it is outward looking in terms of European or global, or is it very much in a healthy way, sort of inward looking to the values that you have within the landscape, within the architecture that exists within Ireland?
I would say of architects of my generation, I suppose we like that sort of both and sort of thing. You know, we are both outward looking and inward looking and recognizing that we need to make architecture which is about here somehow. But of course, we're always looking out and learning from what's happening. And I think we would also maybe see ourselves as part of, I don't know, a movement is not the right word, right? But there is a kind of group of architects percolating all around Europe who would find common interests. You know, for instance, I think like the fact that both Jaume and I both gave you random images. We could choose anything on earth and we both gave you dry stone walls is an indication perhaps that there is this school of thought or way of thinking about things out there in Europe right now. And I think maybe we could list a number of characteristics of it. You know, certainly being open to looking at a wide range of buildings or structures and seeing them as useful for making contemporary architecture, that we see ideas in structures from all eras and all styles that are useful for us, that we're not just like, oh, 20th century, or we're not just, oh, you know, computer things. You know, I'm sure Jaume and I would walk down the street and we'd say, look at that wall, it's amazing, isn't it? And look at that gutter, it's amazing. And all of these things, we see architectural idea in all of them. And I think that's maybe one of the common links about the kind of pan-European thing that's happening right now.
You talk about building culture, but Jaume, you described how sort of building this atlas of reference. But I suppose for me, the interesting thing was even the practice is named after your kind of 3 pillars of investigation. You've got practice, you've obviously got teaching, and then you've got this other sort of studio sort of investigation. Could you describe that maybe for people?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we have, it's a way of understanding how do you think, no? But just starting for teaching, we understand teaching as a way of learning. If not, I mean, we are not masters giving lessons. We want to learn. If not, it has no sense to teach, no? But in any case, since we don't have a School of Architecture here in the island, with these new times that are coming, we have to probably rethink the way of teaching, because now last year we were teaching last time we were teaching, we were at the TU in Munich, no? But you cannot go, I don't know, back and forth every 2 weeks, no? It doesn't seem like, say, very, very comfortable, no? But on the other hand, we have like the investigation is this, like not only to do articles investigation in this way of more academic, but very like in a common way, no? Taking these photos for this atlas or analyzing where these stones are coming from, no? Because, well, since we are working, we discovered the dozens of kinds of marais we have in the island, no? Then to study these things and to learn from these things that we are looking at, no? It's another way, no? And the other thing is to do things, no? To do, I mean, it's to build up not only buildings, but to build up, to make, like in an atelier, a craftsman built, I don't know, a chair or whatever, no? And with this way of doing, every time you do one thing, you make it better, no? Because I think at the end, we are building just one project in our lives, no? It's this project, not that we are going and going, no? And we are going again and again with the same stuff, no? We are lucky because we have clients, and the clients have a schedule and they want the project, because if not, we will never end with the same one, no? But you bring ideas over and over and over, and you, as Ryan, I completely agree with what he said. You took the knowledge from everywhere. You grab from here, from there, from whatever, no? And you get involved because it's a kind of it's the way you look at things, no? It doesn't matter if it's a mill or if it's a song or if it's an old architecture or if it's new. It doesn't really matter, no? And at the same time, it's the same thing when you teach, no? But you try to, I mean, teach it perhaps too much for us. We are very, very, very small and very young, not that much, but well, let's keep on. When we try to teach, we try to teach the way we look at things, not like giving like huge lessons on architecture. You know? somehow it's yeah, like, and this way of looking at things, I think it has the common point in the tradition. No?
Yeah. How do you think that gets communicated outside of the architectural world? Because obviously we do, as a profession, have criticism of maybe being quite internalized and almost communicating in our own language, both linguistically, but also in buildings. How do we sort of present the kind of values that both you and Ryan are communicating? Maybe it's a question for you, Ryan, actually, for how we actually communicate to a broader audience. Could you describe this in your work, actually, the way in which most of what you're doing is for those that are around the architecture that you create rather than those that inhabit it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, there's kind of two questions there. You know, in a way, one is about a kind of ethic within the practice about how we design buildings and who they're for. And then the second question maybe is really about how do we communicate that once it's made or something. You know, the second one is a difficult one. You know, when I first arrived here, I was amazed to find like the best practices in the country would be showing up in the property section as kind of articles about houses that they had done or building projects that they had done or houses, you know, an interior thing or something like that, you know, that, and what it meant that was instead of somehow architects being isolated somehow or thought to be other and sitting in an arts section for people who were architects or artists or interested in that, it meant, no, actually, here's architects. You can all engage with them. You can hire them. You can get them to your house. You can get them to your community center. And so I think that sort of idea, I suppose, to be somehow, or a part of our ambition to be socially relevant to the kind of everyday world and not to navel gaze and not to speak our own language. And I mean that both verbally, but also formally somehow. I think it's really important. And it's, yeah, it's certainly something that occupies a lot of our thought anyways, right? Is how to speak a language, and not just someone speaking an architectural language, which is communicative to, yeah, the people it's for, essentially, and their communities. And so, you know, that means, of course, dealing with their local context. You know, what are buildings like around them? How are they typically made? And I think dealing with things that are familiar somehow is a more potent angle or entrance into someone to affect them somehow, or for it to be emotive somehow, than to use something which is different, right? The architects sort of rely on this oftentimes, and certainly when I was being educated, you know, that what was valued was difference, or uniqueness, or flamboyance or something, right? Kind of chasing an avant-garde or something like that. But I think that has an overall alienating effect on, you know, most people, and does tend to funnel us into our own little architectural world. And so I think the architecture that we make has to be really open to all the ordinary things, right? All the things that people see every day, and to somehow elevate those things to a kind of high art.
Jaume, you're kind of, because you're so embedded within your community, when we walked the streets of your hometown, what came across with the buildings of yours that we saw is that they were always just that. They were just sort of maybe pushing themselves beyond the ordinary. How do you kind of reconcile the kind of craft of building? Because you are quite obsessive with your level of detail and the level of setting out, and the kind of attention to the relationship between the source of the material and the way it's applied to the building. How do you communicate that both to contractors, but also to even the community at large? Do they understand what you're doing?
I think, yeah, I mean, it's clear that what we were doing when we finished our career, it's different from the things that we are doing nowadays, no? And this way of bringing the tradition forward, or to try to work with the common resources, with the common materials, and with the common typologies and the common details, finally, I think this makes much more like closer to the people, let's say, because you can work with tradition, but we are cultural animals, no? We have things in mind, no? We are not starting from scratch. We cannot. We know things. We could say that these are problems. We know Palladio, we know these guys, no? And we have these in our minds, no? You cannot take them out, and I don't want, no? But somehow, because you cannot refuse completely the knowledge of the culture that you know, it has to be like ordinary, no? It's not possible. It's not. You cannot do it. You cannot do that, no? But you have to balance, very well balance, no? The two parts, no? In this sense, to work with the local materials, the local typologies, the local craftsmen, no? This makes that everything becomes much more popular, let's say, somehow, no? More more popular, more ordinary, no? Then this makes architecture closer to the people, no? Why you were like talking about Rudowski a few minutes ago, no? Every architect can say that all those architectures there are very nice, no? Those architectures have, they are built without any kind of cultural knowledge, let's say, but the eyes of that guy that was looking and picking and taking that photos, it has a culture behind. Then somehow it's also again balanced, no? It's not a random image of tradition or random images of the infraordinary, no? It's very well selected, no? It's very precise, no? And this makes very like tasty for architect, because it's like, oh, the hero without architects, no. It's architecture with the eyes of an architect.
That's interesting. Ryan, I was going to pick up on that in the sense of your counselling centre that you built fairly early within the group of buildings you've built in Ireland. And you in one of your talks, you talk about all of the observations that you made of street frontages and shop fronts and the kind of the asymmetry of certain conditions. It's that type of observation when you're coming maybe as an outsider that I find interesting, because it's not necessarily intuitive. If this was a language that had been taught, it's very much a different type of way of communicating.
Well, I guess the thing about that building, I guess, is it's right next to a church. It's right next to the most important church of the town, and so in my view, it needed to be the most background building possible in a way, while still, of course, being a good building. And so again, I'm kind of approaching this from a position of ignorance. How can I do this thing in the most sensitive context for that locality, but in a way which is still, capital A architecture, I guess. And so that's me searching for a language, really, I guess. I often feel like I'm not the language of the buildings, their form and how they're put together. I feel oftentimes isn't coming from me. It's coming from, it's coming from the place. I have to find it somehow in the place, in the immediate context, not necessarily the broad region, let's say, although there would be themes which knitted across the country somehow, but really in a really specific reading of exactly that place. And so in that case, it was about town buildings and town buildings on, in the medieval center of this small town in Ireland. We're doing another building now that it's kind of just near an industrial park. So we're looking at, industrial park making, right? Very closely. We did an apartment in Paris last year in the 16th in a Haussmann building. So we're studying Haussmann buildings and we're visiting the traditional molding makers and having extensive debates about Louis XV versus Louis XVI, moldings. So this is, again, to me, it's about of a highly specific contextual architecture, which will resonate many things around it. I mean, for everybody around it who understands these worlds that the building is located, it'll have all these resonances across all scales, from the scale of form and type all the way down to the scale of detail. You know, like a proliferation of meaning, really, or a proliferation of reference, rather than an elimination of those things.
Yeah, I suppose we're going to be running out of time soon, but I suppose I wanted to ask a practice question to you both, because it's quite important, I think, for everybody who's part of this conversation, that both your portfolios are really, really intense and incredibly demanding to deliver as projects. And you can see that, I can see that as a fellow architect. I'm looking at how much time must be spent on site, or how much time must be spent drawing. How do you square that with staying financially sort of afloat? How do you actually run a practice? What is the actual reality of that for you both, given the successes, the perceived successes from your portfolios? Jaume, do you want to maybe answer that?
I can, but I'm not. Yeah, well, it's a very tough question, Neil, and you know, because we were talking about that, you know. Somehow we were really lucky to win that competition in Switzerland. That explains a lot of things, no? However, since the very beginning, we didn't pay attention. We put our fees in relation to the regular numbers now that everybody has, no? And we didn't pay attention to the number of hours we spent. We are not very good, let's say, money makers, let's say, no? But somehow afterwards you see that all this time you spent is coming back to you, no? With, let's say, new clients, or I don't know, this talk, I don't know, people you can know, no? And because it's, yes, you have to spend on site a lot of time, not just to explain to the builder how you are thinking that, but to have his feedback, to learn from him, to transform your plans, your projects, your ideas, your details that you have in the executive process, very well drawn with thousands of variations, and you choose the best one, fitting with the budget, the site, the materials, everything. But then you have also to fit this detail with the hands of the people that are building that detail, no? Then perhaps no, I'm sure that they know more than us in relation to that. Then we have to also to pay attention to them, no? Not to impose this detail, but to learn and to transform it and to do the definitive version of that, no?
Ryan, how reliant are you on your relationship with the people that build your buildings? Because you obviously talk almost theoretically about, or conceptually about, how you're wanting to work with the fabric that you are kind of adjacent to. But actually, what's the reality in terms of then trying to deliver the building itself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm entirely dependent in a way. And when I first got a job here, you know, just to tell you about maybe my education versus maybe a European one, you know, I got dropped into a practice here in the booming Celtic Tiger era and was told to draw a tender set. And I didn't know what the word tender meant. It's called bid in the States, and I'd never drawn a detail. And so, you know, to be suddenly thrown into working on site like that, and I needed to learn. And so from the beginning, I was always, you know, what do you think? What do you think? How would you do this ordinarily? And then taking maybe how a builder would ordinarily do something and turning that into what we would do, or making something more of that. So now, after all these years, I've got great people who I use regularly, and I trust their knowledge, and they're very open, but I go to them first. I say, I'm thinking about something like this. How would you do it? And then we start to evolve it towards something which I suppose meets both of our ambitions for the thing. And that goes from like guys who lay block to people who are making really fine furniture for us. It's across the spectrum.
So how does it work for you, Jaume, when you leave Majorca and take on work abroad? How do you find those relationships and still try and keep control to the level that you're used to on the island?
Talking a lot with the people, talking a lot, losing a lot of time to to talk and to discuss and to bring things forward, just talking and understanding how they do things, because we didn't know anything about wood, for example. No? And finally, we learned a lot, and they hear to us and we hear to them, and somehow all together we build something. No? Then it's just talking, and because people want to do good things, no, and want buildings to last and want to do nice things, no, they're open to that, no? And you also want to build cheap, you know, it's as they want also. Then it's just to talk and to bring things forward together with the people that are going to do that, no? It doesn't matter if it's in Mallorca or whatever. Here we have the advantage, as Ryan was saying, that we start to know some people that work in a nice way. Then we can call them, hey, do you want to do this, or do you want to do that, or how would you do this, or how would you do that? No? But because you become confident with the results and the way they work. No?
It's the culture,
kind of a net. No? Sorry.
Yeah, but it's the culture of collaboration as well, though, isn't it? It's the idea that you are engaging from an early stage. So actually you're seeing as beyond yourself, there being a group of people who are forming the design team, not maybe just the architect. Because it's, I don't know whether this is specific to more rural work, or whether it's across the board, or whether it's actually stops at a certain scale when you then have to deal with complexities of contracts. Did that change in Switzerland? Or did you find somebody who had the same spirit to work with?
The nice thing, the nice coincidence was that it was also rural. I mean the community, and also the city hall, the people from the city hall, no, they all agree with the concept, with the ideas we were bringing, no, because we were trying just to build a piece of their landscape with a new building that has to look part of that landscape, no. Then just with this idea of the farm, we called in the competition the building the Grange École. It's a playful name with farm and school, no, in French, no. And with this concept, we did a lot of decisions with them, not alone. We were talking with them every 15 days, every 2 weeks, no? And it was super nice to see how people understand the way you think, and they see that it's not strange, and it's like very common things, and very the way you can approach, as you were talking before, no? You can approach people, and people can approach you. We are like the same kind of animals, no?
Yeah. Ryan, maybe to finish with you, the bungalow blitz that obviously challenges the Irish landscape, that obviously makes up the large majority of the kind of the building culture in Ireland. How did you navigate that problem of both the mixture of quality, but also the perception of what was good or ordinary?
Well, I think the interesting thing maybe is, well, we're always trying to, I suppose, get at something authentic, and we do that, I suppose, by trying to get at how things are, how form is has a causal relationship maybe, and emerges out of construction or environment. And so if you look at how a house was built in Ireland in the 1800s or the 1700s, it was a stone wall or a brick wall with very limited timber, with limited spans. And so you end up with simple volumes with pitched roofs. And today, what's mainly available and most affordable to build with is concrete block in limited timber that's imported from Norway or whatever. So the conditions which produce the bungalow or produce the cottage or produce the farmhouse or produce the Majorcan, the causal instrumental background to that is the same as it has always been, in a way, more or less, right? Stereotomic base and a very limited tectonic top on the thing. So I don't see technically very much difference between a bungalow and some vernacular building from 200 years ago. It's fluid and continuous, and so I think by changing a very few things formally that result from that causal core, that kern form core, you can either make something beautiful and amazing, or you can make something horrible like a bungalow with farmers. I choose the former.
No, not at all. I'm afraid we're out of time for this week, but thank you for all the questions. We didn't manage to get through all of them. But it only leaves me to thank Ryan and Jaume. Thanks so much for giving us the time, and obviously for Rosie and Ellis for the platform, and for Will back at Rural Office for putting all of this together. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. We don't know who with yet. Thank you.
Thanks to all. Thank you.
Thank
See you
you.
soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.